Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, December 2nd, 2020. Time to, I guess, pardon somebody else new. Much discussion this morning on the subject of whether or not Donald Trump will issue himself pardons. I think the list is now up to and including Rudy Giuliani and 3 of his own kids, which is, I think probably unprecedented in our history. But hey, you know, the holidays are coming. Happy holidays, kids. I've given you a pardon. And I'm pardoned from not saying Merry Christmas, which we all say now. But whatever. I don't know. And I guess, that'll be interesting, right? He'll have to say, what does he say to Ivanka when he gives her gifts? Does he give her gifts? He's giving her the gift of a pardon. But she's converted. She's Jewish. Jared Kushner is Jewish. Do they get a Happy Hanukkah pardon? Kushner's on the list, of course, as well. I assume he's been working on behalf of his dad, getting a pardon, though he's out of prison. You know, just if you're giving him out for free, I'll take one for my dad too, please. But does Trump say Happy Holidays? Does he say Happy Hanukkah to them? Does he force a Merry Christmas on them? I'm not sure what a culture warrior ought to be doing. We'll find out what's going on there. And apparently there's a pardon in the offing for somebody else whose name is still redacted at this point in what would have been, I guess, the blockbuster of the last day or so. News being reported all over the place. And I have I've merely followed the outrage about it on Twitter. We'll take a look at some of the actual reporting on it. But somehow, somewhere along the line, a document got released by the DOJ, still heavily redacted, but establishing the fact that there's a federal investigation for whatever such an investigation is worth under the Trump administration and the Bill Barr Department of Justice. And yet they've been conducting it. I don't know. I'm not sure what to tell you about this thing. About a pardon that someone's been seeking for someone. We don't know who because it's all redacted, but just a straight-up cash transaction, essentially. But documentation that's being investigated that appears to establish communication between the White House and someone lobbying, unregistered, of course, on behalf of getting someone else a pardon in exchange for a large political contribution. Normally the legal kind of bribery, but I don't know. I'm not certain what brings this out at the moment. We'll catch up on the news stories. I'm sure Greg's been following it as well, although I see he's been following. Is this in your backyard here, Greg? Is there a fox in your backyard that you've been following and that's taken your eye off of the pardon ball? It can be forgiven, of course. It's always interesting to see the local fauna striding across your lawn, especially if you've got a dog that'll make a fuss about it too. Maybe we'll interview Abby about how she feels about the fox, if that is indeed what's going on. So anyway, lots to catch up on, lots of people fretting things like, oh, isn't it illegal or unconstitutional for a president to pardon himself or to sell pardons in exchange for bribes? Yeah, maybe not. We don't know for sure. And there's lots of legal scholars who are enjoying the fact that no one has ever decided on a case like this because no one ever has been corrupt enough to consider doing something like this and then get caught about it and then continue on with the scheme. But there are plenty of constitutional lawyers out there who will tell you, well, we don't really know. And the Supreme Court being what it is, I suppose this thing that was ordinarily considered beyond the pale, and it would certainly be unconstitutional on its face, might be something completely different. We might have egg on it. It might have egg on its face rather than being constitutional on its face. And, we'll review that. There's a couple of days to talk that over some more. I don't know. It's at this point, we're so far gone, I don't even know if this would interest Armando or not to discuss. However, we have available a number of other stories, equally inconclusive in some cases, others equally outrageous. But let's see what Greg has rounded up for us today. I'm eager to find out. Oh, look at this. I apparently lost my connection after answering the phone the first time. Let's try this. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Hey, good morning. We're doing pretty good here.
All right. Good. Is that Fox in your backyard that I see?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was on my way to do the show. I had already done the pundit roundup, and I just stopped for a cup of coffee in between putting up the roundup and coming to the show. And out my back window was this fox. I'd cuddled on the lawn and was just sort of hanging. And then decided to give us some nice frontal views, and as he trotted back and forth, checking out the birds at the bird feeder, and then just sort of went off in the woods. So, the show just had to wait. I couldn't tell the fox to wait. But Abby was inside, so there was nothing to discuss there.
All right. Well, because, fox and hounds and whatnot, they go back a long time.
This particular fox, family lives in the neighborhood, and we've seen him about the same time of day, for weeks. And when my son's Shiba Inu, which looks like a fox, was staying with us, they actually confronted each other on the lawn. It was
Spider-Man
like Spider-Man pointing at each other pictures. Because they looked like totally alike, and they just looked at each other and looked at each other. Neither one made a sound. Neither one made a move. They just looked at each other and looked at each other, and then the fox trotted off.
Yeah, checking each other. You look like a fancy fox.
I actually have a nice shot.
You look like a retro fox.
Anyway, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Let's do the pardon since that came up.
Sure, why not?
And one of the Twitter folks who follows me was kind enough to send this story from February 2020. Now, I don't know if this is what's going on, but one has to assume. Again, I am not a lawyer, and I don't play one on the internet.
Were you in February?
And I wasn't ever.
All right,
and I won't ever be. But it seems to me that if the Department of Justice is leaking redacted or letting the public see redacted information about a particular trial that hasn't, as they like to say in the legal business, ripened yet, it must have taken place some time ago. It's not like, this happened overnight. So Rudy Giuliani and the children of Trump begging for pardons, which is the New York Times story, is a little different than something that happened a while ago, worked its way through the legal system, and only now is getting released. And so for that reason, this February 2020 story caught my eye. It's from ABC News. It says, family of Texas man Trump pardoned, dished out donations to his reelection campaign. So you have to wonder whether it's this case.
I guess so. Oh, maybe.
Who knows? Maybe there's like 19 others.
Yeah,
President Trump on Tuesday granted clemency to a host of high-profile figures back in February, Tuesday of February. One of the lesser-known individuals granted pardons and clemency is a relatively obscure former construction company executive from Texas whose family members have given six-figure donations to the president's reelection campaign. Pogue Construction founder Paul Pogue, who pleaded guilty in 2010 to underpaying taxes by more than $400,000, sounds like a Republican, according to media reports, and was sentenced to 3 years in prison, was among 11 individuals pardoned or commuted by President Trump, including Rod Blagojevich.
Oh, yes, that guy, who also took bribes for things.
Who has defended the president against the now-wrapped congressional impeachment efforts, and former New York City Police Department Commissioner Bernie Kerik.
Who has been on the COVID caravan lately.
Was also a close intimate of Rudy Giuliani's. Not a cousin, but an intimate. Married, but you never know. While Pogue himself hasn't been an outspoken Trump defender, his family members have given more than $200,000 to the president's high-dollar fundraising vehicle for the re-election as recently as last fall. And Paul Pogue's son, Ben Pogue, who now leads the family construction company, and his wife together gave a total of $238,000. And the couple gave $135,000 to Trump victory, and more than $103,000 as in-kind contributions for air travel. And, so the question comes up, is this kind of thing that they're talking about here, was there a whole, look, we know how to do this. You put the money up, and then we, on the other end, and the we is undefined at this particular point in time, But that we must be close enough to make a pitch, because you wouldn't give money unless you thought there was some chance of this actually happening. And in this case, it did happen. So somebody had, a channel that went directly to the president, who could then pardon him.
Yeah.
Was it Jared? Was it somebody else? Who knows? So why is Trump talking about pardoning the kids now? Well, this might be the kind of scheme that they need to be pardoned for.
Sure.
I don't know any.
A number
it's
of
all
things
redacted.
Be true.
It would be irresponsible not to speculate, and it certainly makes a nice story, given the fact that there's actually this newspaper article back in February saying, yes, there are people who want pardons who give campaign contributions to Trump, and by the way, that's what's being cited in this now available to the public but very redacted story from.
We don't know, and I guess I don't know whether we'll find out anytime soon or not, but I mean, it certainly could be. It's highly questionable. What?
It's ridiculous. That couldn't happen. Nobody would. Well,
right. No, that's not.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah. That's crazy. We'll talk about it when it happens, of course, and I know it's happening. I don't know. This may or may not be them, of course. This is just an otherwise inexplicable pardon. It doesn't surprise me that the campaign donations went back.
If it's not them, do you mean there's two families like this?
Yes, at least. I don't know if they're people are analyzing the redactions. Well, does this name fit in that space? And there was one note had a stray apostrophe in there that made it look like the name must end in an S. As people make when they're adding possessives to a surname that ends in S and has the you get the idea with the stray apostrophe at the end. But I don't know. That's inconclusive. It could certainly be a stray mark, but I think there are probably plenty of families who are fitting this bill. It was a weird pardon to begin with. Like they got a sentence. It's not like a long lifetime sentence. It didn't need to really be commuted. By the time you got around to it, the sentence was probably over or near over. It's a minor case in the panoply that's out there, and not the sort of thing that usually rises to the top of the pardon attorney's pile, which is, I guess, why you needed the campaign contributions to speed it along. But a construction guy in Texas who underpaid his taxes by $400,000 and got sentenced to 3 years, that doesn't rise to the level of presidential intervention unless something like this happens. So I think it probably hints at a much larger scheme, and there's probably plenty of families just like this.
Right. Justice points out Chris Collins fits because, it ends in S and it would have an apostrophe and all that. I don't know about that kind of thing. I'm just saying there's a pattern here.
Okay. Yes, I think it's obvious, and I think we all knew it. And I don't know. I guess if we walk around shocked for a while, will they report on it some more because they think they're thrilling us? Maybe we'll do that.
Right.
Oh my God, I can't get enough reporting about this. Give me more. I mean, it's true.
It's not that Donald Trump wanted a $3 billion bribe from Saudi Arabia or Russia. It's that he'd gladly steal $20 off the table in front of your nose if he thought it would help him because, there's a pattern here. I mean,
it's true. He definitely goes out of his way for small wads of bills that I would have thought that, a fancy billionaire would have said, I don't even get out of bed for anything under $1 trillion. But, okay, he's a grubber. What can you do?
Well, what can you do? That's really the point.
He's got small hands. He has to make many trips in order to collect the cash.
He's a grubber is exactly what's going on here. So, lots of stuff going on. It's almost hard to put it in order, but we had that in the background, so I thought we should finish that up. Let's talk politics. A whole lot of politics going on. A whole lot of politics that's involving Georgia.
Okay.
But maybe we should even start with Pennsylvania.
Oh.
Or New York. Pick a state.
Well, you're telling me to pick a state. You just went through
pick
3.
New York.
You pick
What's
a state.
the New York one? Cuomo signs law aimed at weakening Trump's pardon power, closes the double jeopardy loophole, opening the door for Tish James to go after the family as soon as he's out of office.
Ooh,
So that would complete our pardon power discussion for today. Real lawyers can perhaps weigh in on what it all means, but there's that.
He's guilty.
Speaking of lawsuits and politics, we have Pennsylvania. John Fetterman, the lieutenant governor and very active on Twitter, says, the Republicans have offered a lawsuit, but make it Velveeta.
What?
U.S. Supreme Court asked to block Biden win in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Says the story from Penn Live.
Okay, go.
Okay, Republicans attempting to undo President-elect Joe Biden's victory in Pennsylvania asked the U.S. Supreme Court on Tuesday, that was yesterday, to take up their lawsuit 3 days after it was thrown out by the highest court in the battleground state. So in other words, this is the end game. This was the whole point of releasing the Kraken in Georgia. The super duper, super sophisticated, badly misspelled, doesn't make any sense lawsuit elite strike force from Rudy Giuliani is now going to the Supreme Court, and that's the end game. You know, that either gets thrown out or it gets tossed. With the opinions, but either way, what they're trying to do is claim that Pennsylvania's expansive vote by mail law is unconstitutional because it required a constitutional amendment to authorize its provisions, and that wasn't done. So therefore, you should throw out the entire election. Okay. That's their argument.
Well, let's do it.
Now, Pennsylvania Supreme Court on Saturday night, according to Penn Live, the news site, threw out the lawsuit, including an order by a lower court judge blocking the certification. Judges cited the law's 180-day time limit on filing legal challenges, as well as a staggering demand that an entire election be overturned retroactively. Yes. But it's being filed by U.S. Representative Mike Kelly.
Oh, wow. That doesn't really mean anything, but okay. He's doing it.
But if he got elected, is he throwing out his own election? This is why it's so bizarre.
No,
in the state's courts, Kelly and the other Republican plaintiffs have sought to either throw out the 2.5 million mail-in ballots submitted under the law, most of them by Democrats, or to wipe out the election results and direct the state's Republican-controlled legislature to pick Pennsylvania's presidential electors. Separately, a Republican state lawmaker is calling Pennsylvania's introduction of no-excuse absentee voting a failed experiment and wants to get rid of the whole thing.
Oh.
So this is the plan all along, and as Chuck Todd might say, and it just might have worked had there been an incredibly close election where only Pennsylvania was the deciding factor, like Florida in 2000.
No, but Chuck Todd was on Scooby-Doo.
It wasn't close. It wasn't just Florida. It wasn't just Pennsylvania in this case, and it's not going to work at all.
All right. Yet we should, I think, probably occupy the time of our esteemed Supreme Court justices with this emergency appeal.
Yeah, because they have nothing else to do.
Right.
So what's going on here? Well, the pressure is also being ramped up in Georgia, where, of course, we have those two runoffs coming up in January. It has all gone too far, each separate word with a period after it.
Yes.
So, Gabriel Sterling, with Georgia Secretary of State, who Sterling himself, for those out of state, is a lifelong conservative Republican, and so is his boss, Brad Raffensperger. It has all gone too far, Mr. President. You have not condemned these actions or the language. All you have not said a damn word are complicit in this. So the Georgians are getting upset, and actually the worry is that the election itself is going to be compromised, not by cheating, but by half of the Republicans thinking it's all a conspiracy, why bother, and therefore sitting it out. So the Georgian GOP is getting very, very upset about what's going on here, with Brian Kemp, the governor, being attacked daily by Trump, with Brad Raffensperger being attacked, and with even, I think we covered on the show on Monday, Ron Romney McDaniel getting hit by complaints from Georgia voters saying, why should we even bother?
Right.
We have individual Georgia lawyers saying you all should boycott this ridiculous fixed election. We already know the Democrats have won. I support that. I think they should boycott it. But, it all has ramifications when you just go nuts and you can't fix yourself. So what goes on with all of these people? Let's finish this story off. This is another one, Josh Kraushaar writing National Journal, not behind paywall. Trump's suicide squeeze against Senate Republicans by airing baseless allegations of election fraud. The president's damaging the GOP's ability to win two pivotal runoffs in Georgia. If Trump cost McConnell the Senate, it would break the pair's uncomfortable alliance.
Okay. It's pretty fragile. Yeah, sure.
So McConnell has been letting the party's political wounds fester until now. His strategy of overlooking Trump's worst excesses in service of a conservative GOP agenda has held his party in good stead during the Trump era. Over the past 4 years, Republicans benefited with the GOP base, while McConnell passed tax cuts and confirmed judges. McConnell's instincts are politically understandable if morally suspect, but even if a small fraction of Trump's base decides to stay home for the Georgia runoff, Democrats would hold a clear advantage in a contest that would be decided by which party's voters are more enthusiastic. But playing footsie with the president carries its own set of risks. The Republican senators aren't able to utilize the most effective message, which is checking President-elect Biden's agenda in the upper chamber, if they're not willing to acknowledge he's actually the president-elect. Putting off an inevitable confrontation with reality only risks an even messier break closer to the runoff when electors formally cast in mid-December to certify. Long term, we hurt the brand of our Republican Party, which is certainly bigger than one person, Lieutenant Governor in Georgia Jeff Duncan told CNN. Trump heads to Georgia on Saturday for a rally, but it's not clear what happens there. Like who he's exciting and, whether it's all wink, wink, I know what you said, but we know what you mean. That's happened a lot when he's decided to throw his weight behind the traditional, mainstream conservative, but there's a nutter running in the race, and the people there say, yeah, we know we support the nutter. You just have to say this, traditional party thing, but, we know what you mean, not what you say, so don't worry about it. We got your back here.
Okay.
So, it's hard to know exactly how they're going to react to the rally in the middle of a pandemic. Indeed, it was just 3 years ago when Trump advisor Steve Bannon, writes Josh Kraushaar, threatened to primary nearly every sitting Republican senator for being uncommitted enough to the Trumpian cause. Bannon's own undisciplined tactics ended up getting him kicked out of the White House, but without the benefit of capable political advisors around, Trump could end up facing similar backlash after he leaves office. So it's hard to know how this is going to work out. We'll have to wait and see. But it could be bad. This is a Jim Galloway opinion piece from AJC Opinion. The Kelly Loeffler-Raphael Warnock runoff crosses a line and talks about the fact that in their infinite wisdom, the Republicans, led by Doug Collins, who isn't even in the race, decided to go after Martin Luther King Jr.'s church, which Reverend used to lead, and
no one likes churches.
He's running for Senate now, so that's why I say used to. Until last weekend, the Loeffler campaign had wisely steered clear of direct attacks on Ebenezer itself, the church. As a cultural touchstone, the storied church once led by King and his father has become, as Loeffler noted, sacred ground. But Doug Collins just went there. There's no such thing as a pro-choice pastor. What you have is a lie from the bed of hell. It's time to send it back to Ebenezer Baptist Church. Hard to know what it means in this particular case. Hard to walk that back. But as Galloway points out in the piece here, it's a strategy abetted by a key difference between white Protestants and black Protestants, easily exploitable. Generally speaking, white churches emphasize personal salvation and black churches emphasize the tension between that and social justice. A tradition that predates the Civil War, and in theological shorthand, it's the sin of slavery versus the slavery of sin. So let us dissect one example. In mid-November, a conservative media outlet somehow came by the knowledge that way back in 2011, Warnock uttered the phrase, "America, nobody can serve God in the military. You can't serve God in money." And a 3-minute YouTube was provided as evidence. The problem is there was 30 minutes of sermon in front of that clip, which makes it clear Warnock was delivering a very standard pulpit point about priorities. You can't serve two masters, and first, loyalty is to God. And in churches with largely white congregations, pastors will often make spouses squirm by insisting God must come before wife or husband. From his Ebenezer pulpit, Warnock was making a similar point about powerful individuals and entire nations. Did I mention this particular sermon was delivered on Palm Sunday?
No.
For some reason, the archaeologists who dug up that 2011 sermon by Warnock neglected one of the pastor's first examples about the dangers of a powerful person operating without a God-driven conscience. He cited a certain reality TV personality who was then spreading the lie that Obama wasn't born in the United States.
I wonder who that is.
And yet, in essence, Collins agreed with Warnock. The Georgia congressman chaplain has been a steadfast champion of religious expression in the U.S. military. So what's going on here? Well, politics.
Sure. This thing is simultaneously helpful and hurtful, and I would like to keep the helpful part. Thank you.
The good thing, I think, is that Ossoff and Warnock have decided to run as a duo, as a pair. You can't win in Georgia without enthusiastic black vote. Yes. And so it's smart on Ossoff's part and smart on Warnock's part. And besides, that's who the Democratic Party is there. And you need your voters, and so, go for it. And the Republicans are playing as if, this is 2008. And the thing is that whether or not that marginally might have worked, not when your party's split by a civil war between those who think it's all fraud and why bother, and those who think that it's important to, keep a Republican Senate, except that what difference does it make because Trump's really president?
And will be forever, I suppose.
And will be forever, and then after that, his kids. So, that's where the politics all blend together.
Yeah.
Do the Republicans really, really, really believe this? Well, after the break, which is coming up, I got a lovely story from The Bulwark written by Mark Becker, who used to be the GOP leader in Wisconsin. And the title just tells it all. My call with Ron Johnson. He knows Biden won, but won't admit it, and then talks about what's going on here.
Oh, okay. Well, then we will find out about that. Yeah, we'll take that break. It'll be, we'll shift gears and head up to Wisconsin and find out what they think about it. The Georgia runoff is going to be super crazy. I have my doubts about whether or not, the Republicans who say, why bother voting, really actually mean it or not. They're not organized.
You just need some of them to sit home.
That's true. Well, I hope they do. They haven't before. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Okay, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Our break is done, so now we get to talk about what's going on. The related issues from Wisconsin. What's happening? How do we shift to Wisconsin?
Well, we're doing a geography lesson. We're into geography. We want to hit all the states. Not all the states are pertinent, but we'll hit the ones we can. So Wisconsin, because there's a senator there named Ron Johnson.
Oh, yes.
Who's one of the dumber, more obvious liars.
Yeah.
In the Senate.
Right.
And that's why it's relevant. So the article says, my call with Ron Johnson, he knows Biden won but won't admit it. The Wisconsin senator says it would be political suicide. Now, my discussion with Johnson was one I have hesitated openly discussing for 3 weeks. As a former chairman for the Brown County Republican Party, I have people I respect deeply who are still members of the party.
Is there really a Brown County, though?
Yeah. But after seeing what's going on, basically, he says, I can no longer stay silent. The too long didn't read of the call, the TLDR, was this. Senator Johnson knows Biden won a free and fair election. He's refusing to admit it publicly and stoking conspiracies that undermine our democracy solely because it would be political suicide to oppose Trump, and I find this unconscionable. Now, full disclosure, I initiated our exchange when I gave Johnson a phone call on November 6th and left him a message. I told him I wanted to discuss, among other things, the direction which the GOP has had. My hopes we could leave some of the more bigoted and conspiratorial elements of Trumpism behind now that the president had lost. I never thought Johnson would return my call, given how outspoken I've been over the past 4 years. This fellow, endorsed and campaigned for Russ Feingold.
Yeah, that would probably lower your chances.
This year, I was featured in an ad for Republican voters against Trump, yet here we were on November 14th talking like we used to many years ago. I opened the conversation by remarking on my concern for the party. Johnson argued that kind of message from Republican voters was one he received loud and clear in every conversation We have moments where we look back and wish we said something differently. This is one of those cases. I wish I had reminded the senator he's not just a senator for Wisconsin Republicans, but a senator for all of Wisconsin. And although the message from Wisconsin Republicans was a strong one, the message from Wisconsin was much clearer. It was a rejection of Trumpism. Yeah. Senator Johnson then asked me if I'd ever been to a Trump rally. I haven't. You haven't. Armando has.
Yes.
Reported on it. They're pretty wacky.
Yeah. But okay.
I chuckled and responded I had not. Yeah. He said that I should have gone because if I did, I would have seen that the one constant throughout all his rallies was the people there absolutely love America.
It was a weak conclusion, but yes.
Yeah, right.
All right.
I'm sure white and racist. You love that America. I reminded him that in every speech I gave as a Republican county chairman, I asked those in attendance to stop calling Democrats the enemy. I would say Democrats aren't the enemy. We both love our country. We just had different ways to achieve that goal. And I told him that I'd be willing to bet any rally Bernie Sanders or AOC held, you'd see a crowd who loved America just as much. And Johnson scoffed and said, absolutely not.
Right, of course.
Sanders and AOC want to fundamentally change our country, and you can't love something you want to change. I told you Johnson's like one of the stupidest guys in Congress.
Yeah.
I just agreed and believe this is a toxic way to look at our politics, but he moved on, and we covered the election results. And this fellow says he was both frustrated and gravely concerned about how the GOP is continuing to advance this proof conspiracy theories. And here's the thing. Johnson knows it's bullshit because 5 years ago he said so. In 2015, he introduced legislation streamlining the transition process, saying the peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy. It's also an enormous undertaking requiring months of planning in order to be successful. And here he was 5 years later on the phone saying he knows Biden won, but refusing to publicly congratulate him and standing in the way of the transition. And since then, Johnson's performance has gone even further. On Tuesday, that was yesterday, Attorney General Bill Barr announced he had found no evidence of fraud that would rise to the level of altering the outcome. And Johnson then said Barr needed to show evidence, meaning a negative. You have to show evidence that there's nothing there.
Yes. Usually a big problem. We haven't even discussed that one yet, but
well,
what do you say?
He had a 3-hour meeting, but before the meeting he said that. So, even the loyalists are trying to talk Trump into, listening to what they're saying. And the senator talked about how Trump is being right on the First Step Act, right on China, right on the economy. He said Trump had so many accomplishments, nobody wants to talk about it because everybody hates his guts. But
I agree with
Johnson,
part.
It's really about what's right and what's wrong. And in his mind, Trump was right on so many things. I asked him if it's truly about right versus wrong. Why don't you call out what Trump does wrong? And he said that would be political suicide.
Well, yes, true. Also, there's no evidence that he's done anything.
So you can only talk about what's right. You can't talk about what's wrong. There's so much wrong that means you can't talk at all. So, pretty bizarre.
Yeah, and none of what
was
right.
Now, to his credit, Johnson was cordial because it's very important in Washington to be cordial. You can't be mean. If you send a mean tweet like Neera Tanden, then nobody wants you to be office management budget head. Because nobody sends mean tweets in Washington. That's like you can't do that, right?
Right.
Hasn't happened in the last 4 years. Nobody mean tweets.
Right. Everyone has been best.
Right. So the problem, this fellow goes on to say about Johnson, is that although he understands the reality, he refuses to live in the reality publicly because of political considerations. And looking back at the disaster these last 4 years have been, I hope my speaking out gives those on the right permission structure, we love permission structures, to come back to the world of facts. They are servants first and foremost, servants not just of one party, but of all their constituents. They owe us more. It's not too late, Senator Johnson. Just tell America what you told me, as if it were that simple. Of course it's too late. Johnson and Byron York and a lot of the enablers, Hugh Hewitt, never going to happen. They've sold their souls. And they figure they can make money doing this. It's the same reason why Donald Trump is continuing the farce of the election isn't over. Yeah. He's trying to make money on it. It's just that simple. And there are people who will believe that, and there are marks you could hit up to do that. And it's really not more complicated than that, but it gets more complicated because of the ramifications.
I guess. And, no telling whether, I don't know, maybe even the people who are contributing don't actually believe what they're saying they believe, but who cares as long as the check clears?
Look, I mean, sometimes people take politics and they just make it way too complicated. It's really very simple. It's about power. Everything the Republican Party does is about power. Everything that the religious right does is about power, and everything that white supremacists do is about power. And the game of politics is to try to cloak that in some sort of high-sounding civic meaning. But it's all about power. It's how McConnell operates. I guess so. It's how the Republican Party operates. The Democrats don't quite operate that way. Their base wishes they would, but they don't. And so sometimes there are considerations to, we have to consider not just the people who voted for us, but the people who didn't. And Republicans say, nah, that's not how you stay in power.
Right. Well, there's certainly different approaches to what the power is good for, and how you should use it. I guess at bottom you could still say the same thing about anybody. Well, it's about power. It's just, do you exercise it wisely and cautiously, or just say, well, I've got it, so I might as well club somebody over the head with it.
So, interesting things. Now, meanwhile, using your power is where the nitty-gritty of day-to-day stuff usually comes in. It's not usually constitutional crisis writ large. It's smaller things like Mitch McConnell deciding that, there's not going to be a COVID relief package. Okay, maybe there is, but I'll give you a tiny little bit of COVID relief. I mean, teeny tiny, like, a day's worth in return for legal protections against businesses for, betting on whether or not your employees get sick.
Right, things like that. Another round of PPP
and I have the votes,
bailouts.
so I can do it. Well, he does have the votes till January, but we'll see what happens in January.
Yeah. He lost Martha McSally's vote, but okay. Still got enough.
Yeah. Well, it's getting harder and harder for him to, keep it all together. Right. And again, his caucus on the outside, because Republicans play this game well, looks united, but on the inside, of course, is pretty divided. I mean, there's people who know that Biden won, and there's people who know that Biden won but won't say so.
Yes. And all right.
Trump, who refuses to admit it. Yeah. And, the hard part about Trump is he really delusional, or is he just doing it to grift? And the answer is yes.
Right. I'm not certain whether it makes a difference to know.
The end result is you put COVID relief and COVID everything on the back burner, except when you think that it will serve your power purposes. And so here's a great example of the worst possible way to do public health information to the public, and that is that as the companies and the FDA struggle with the best way to approve safely and transparently the vaccine against the coronavirus that we all need, Trump decides that he's going to have a vaccine summit with him explaining how this is all going to work. So he's called for that.
Oh, good. Yeah. A vaccine summit.
And we're already trying to get this done with the least amount of political pressure and convince the public it's both safe and necessary. And Trump getting involved in it just throws all of that out the window. If you want to make it the Trump vaccine, that's good for convincing certain members of the Republican Party that maybe they should get the vaccine, but that's like 30% of the country.
Yeah. They might end up having to do something like, all right, well, we have this vaccine. We're going to take this portion of it and we'll put the label Trump vaccine on it. Just otherwise, we're not going to get these people to take the vaccine, and we have to get them to
Everybody else has to take the regular vaccine, but Trump voters can have the Trump vaccine.
Maybe.
If that's what he did, I could live with it as wacky as it is if it got the vaccine into people's arms.
Right.
Yeah. But that's not what he's going to do. He's going to take credit for everything and say, I really won the election, and let's not even talk about coronavirus. Let's talk about the fact that Joe Biden should be locked up. And so that's exactly why we threw you out, And so, and by the way, are you going to do an advertisement since everybody's cameras turned on you? Because you couldn't get anybody to watch you after you lost. So are you going to have everybody watch you, and then you're going to just give us a price list of what pardons cost? What are you going to do in this
How about
space
a price list for
that
the,
you are given because the
vaccine.
networks feel obligated now because you're talking about coronavirus?
Well, yeah.
We've seen these press conferences before. He's done them.
Sure.
They're disasters.
Yeah, I mean, this will be really interesting to see. And, of course, it is potentially disastrous in that, well, who knows what could happen. We don't know what the hell he'll say. And he may say something that undermines everybody's confidence.
Certainly speculate about all the bad stuff that could come out of it.
Sure. At the minimum, it becomes, he's already stated the theme. Don't give Biden any credit for this vaccine, even if you get it while he's president. It's really me. So that might be the sum total of what it is that he wants to do, or it could be much, much worse. But right. Yeah, at a minimum.
My friend Jody Leonard, who was a risk communicator for WHO and CDC at various stages in her career, tweets, "A monstrous risk communication mistake. Trump to host a Vax summit to brag about himself 2 days before FDA's Pfizer meeting. His prior bragging decreased public confidence and put vax makers in a double bind about when to announce results." Because if he's announcing it, then, is it real? Is it not real? Does anybody trust him?
Yeah, that's what worried me the other day. He made some comments about the impending availability of the vaccine, which has been reported all over the place, and you have every reason to believe is true. And then Trump said it was coming soon, and he said 2 weeks, and I was like, oh, my God, he just erased the whole thing. Right. What are we going to do? Now there's no vaccine. Then,
to that comment on Twitter, you had doctors writing in saying that's exactly the problem. I've had patients that say I was thinking about the vaccine, but I don't believe anything Trump says. So if he says it's good, does that mean it's bad?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a real problem. I think it's still possible for, to take the word of Pfizer and Moderna and the various manufacturers, and even if Trump says this thing is good, you just
We're not
discount
talking about
him.
How
but still,
you remark to this, or how you respond to this.
Oh, no.
We're talking about how the general public responds to this. You're looking at this logically.
Oh, yes, right. I forgot about the rest of this. All right. Well, I don't know what to say.
So it's a big deal.
Stuff it in the crust of a Pizza Hut pizza and see if that works.
Whether it's killing the Iranian nuclear scientist trying to set back any effort to reconstitute the Iran deal, or whether you thought when it comes to the coronavirus that, how much harm can Trump do in just the amount of time he has left?
Well, that I have a question.
We're here to tell you he could do a lot of harm.
Yes, it certainly, it can certainly happen. I was just thinking again this morning about, it's now, I guess tomorrow will be 8 weeks since Trump appeared or put a green screen photo of the White House lawn behind him, just out of the hospital at Walter Reed, and promised everybody for free the miracle cure that turned his life around in a matter of hours. And that it was coming soon, and the FDA would take years, but I can do it in a couple of weeks, and it's because of me. And I'm just kind of curious, like, how that got forgotten or whatever. But that won't impact the vaccine thing. And I think he just dropped this entirely and said, we'll just focus on the vaccine instead. But I am curious about how any of the things in his stupid video could possibly have been true, and we still have hospitals with no capacity for new patients. I mean, why don't they just take the miracle stuff and put it in everybody and make new beds available? Because they'll all walk out of there in an hour.
So, as a quick reminder, and maybe we should finish with this because it is the big story, of course. The pundit roundup focused on the pandemic set to ramp up after the Thanksgiving holiday.
Yes.
And now that November's over and we're into December 2nd today, the COVID trackers are noting that you get a blip of a drop in cases, hospitalizations, and deaths, less hospitalizations than the other two, because of reporting issues around holidays. They've noted that happened before. It happened at Labor Day, and then it jumps up again. But if you look monthly, the monthly cases since March until now, a terrible month for monthly cases now. Monthly hospitalizations higher than it's ever been, and monthly deaths are third highest. April and May were higher, but December's going to catch up, unfortunately. So we're in a bad way with that. And outside of Chicago and Illinois, the Carroll Times had a 3-part series of Spreading Sickness about a group of friends infected by the coronavirus and how each one got picked off one by one. It's horrible. But it's a reminder that these statistics, under 40,000 deaths and such, are actually all individuals, and they all matter, and that Trump interfering with what's going on in regard to the vaccine announcements and stuff like that is bad, and things are going to get worse before they get better. The vaccine is a wonderful thing. It needs to be rolled out properly, but we have a lot of time between then and now where things get worse before they get better. And so, we have to steel ourselves for the things that are to come. And the things that are to come are really bad news about increasing deaths over the next couple of weeks.
Yes. Which will no doubt double down on as people ignore that or neglect to read that information and then say, what should I do for Christmas? And the answer probably for a lot of them, for those who survived Thanksgiving, they'll say, I didn't get it at Thanksgiving. What are the odds of getting it at a different time of year? I don't know. Same as always. The
odds add up if you just keep exposing yourself over and over and over and over.
That's
but, the thing. We shall see.
But I didn't get it last time, so I won't get it this time. Past performance is an obvious indicator of future.
Well, results. I was in a car crash and I didn't die, so obviously car crashes aren't fatal. So I don't have to worry about it.
Right.
I'll just have 5 others and see what happens.
Yeah. Eventually, possibly.
Eventually, but that's then. That's later. As far as now goes.
And God's will as well.
Exactly.
So you can't fight with that.
So that's my semi-depressing summary for today. The good news is vaccine is coming, and the end of Trump's interregnum is certainly coming. And the bad news is neither of those things are here yet.
Yes. Well, the people are counting down the days, so that's nice. And,
it's nice to know at least under the surface Republicans do understand a little bit about what's going on. The fact that they feel politically constrained not to do anything about it because otherwise they may lose, and God forbid that should happen.
Yes.
Is where we're at. Yeah. So take care and stay safe. Wear your mask. Wear your damn mask over your nose even. And I'll see you tomorrow.
Yes.
In a proverbial sense, since we're doing talk radio.
Don't know about that proverb. Okay, right. Thanks very much. We hope everything stays stable between now and then, and that
I got to go find a fox.
Right. Oh, yeah. You might as well. You can make a sport of that, chasing them around. Get a horse.
Get a dog.
Right. That's what people used to yell out the window at joggers once in a while. Back in the old days when it was still weird to be out jogging. Yeah. Anyway, okay. We'll just cross our fingers that there isn't martial law imposed between then and now, because somebody did take
MARSHALL, martial law.
Yes, I know that guy very well. And his law is horrible.
Yep.
But yet we
Take care. Talk to you
okay.
tomorrow.
Very good. Thanks, Greg. And just for the rest of you who are wondering, well, why would we be under martial law tomorrow versus today? You're not under martial law now. How could we possibly be under martial law the next day? Things change, but much chatter on Twitter about essentially inconsequential, I think, until martial law is imposed. And I say, damn, I underestimated the effect of a full-page ad in yesterday's Washington Times, which is an actual newspaper, and some people actually pay to get it and open it up. I don't know anybody who does personally, but it does exist. I have seen it. J.J. McNabb. Who better to report on what the hell's going on here than J.J. McNabb? She says the We the People Convention. This is, I don't know, a group of idiots who want to do something, including impose martial law in the country, and I think have a constitutional convention to rewrite everything such that they win all contests and you lose all contests. That's basically what it comes down to. So We the People Convention, which alleges that it is a group large enough to warrant an acronym, an abbreviation of WTPC, not a television station or anything like that. It's not, I don't know. So the We the People Convention took out a full-page ad yesterday, like Trump once did, about the Central Park Five, as they were then known. Took out a full-page ad yesterday in the Washington Times, which nobody reads, calling for martial law, which, I call for a lot of things. Hey, I've called for, takeout delivery in the past and it hasn't shown up. So calling for things isn't necessarily the most reliable method of delivery. But anyway, they're calling for martial law, which is odd. This has been endorsed by the recently pardoned Michael Flynn, the notorious spy who may still be in trouble nonetheless, as well as Trump lawyer Lynn Wood, the guy who's filing down in Georgia, and the former Trump lawyer, as she calls her, Sidney Powell. And there's a little screen grab here, the We the People convention. They have a logo and everything, and it makes it look like they're super democratic, super patriots. Because, as you know, we the people are 3 words that are in the Constitution. And so that's that. They therefore make sense and are super patriots. What have they got here? The subheader of their piece here. Exercising extraordinary authority in defense of our vote may be required. You can tell it's required because of the way they've capitalized each of these words. May be required because martial law is better than civil war. That's what it says. The text of the ad is quite remarkable, JJ tells us. Since I see a lot of people posting excerpts, I'm going to post the entire manifesto here. This is part 1. This is, I don't know. We'll never get through this, but I guess we'll give you a taste of it. Probably the excerpts are more fun, but, you know, we follow JJ and she follows the methodological recommendations of true journalists and gives you the full context. Are you interested in hearing some of this stuff? I got to tell you, it looks pretty dumb, quite honestly. In the months following the start of the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln, so far so good, struggled to preserve the Union. Many objected to Lincoln's extraordinary use of presidential authority, in particular his suspension of the right of habeas corpus. On June 12, 1863, Lincoln defended his extreme measures in a letter published in the New York Times. Therefore, we're fine, I guess. Citing Article 1 of the Constitution, he argued, ours is a case of rebellion. In fact, a clear, flagrant, and gigantic case of rebellion. I didn't even realize he said gigantic. And the provision of the Constitution that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless, when, in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it, is the provision which specifically applies to our present case. Lincoln used the same reasoning in justifying a series of extraordinary presidential orders. And it's true that he did. And they go on to list some of the orders. Well, I don't know. Just facially, do you see any distinction between then and now? There was, in fact, an army in the field made up of Southerners who had purported to secede from the Union and was, in fact, attacking American installations and taking its troops on in battle all over the country. But, you know, now, on the other hand, for instance, there are some people who protest against police violence and then go home. So, you know, same. You can see how that. Oh, so what other presidential orders do they list as justification? Or as precedent, Lincoln ordered hundreds of northern newspapers that spoke against him to be shut down and their owners and editors arrested. And of course, these guys are, by the way, I mean, it should be pointed out that they're looking upon these measures favorably, right? And that they want to do the same thing. Lincoln ordered the arrest of Ohio Congressman Clement Vallandigham, I guess. I don't know how he pronounces it, but he's dead. He can't object. For the crime of speaking out against him, Chief Justice of the U.S., Roger Taney, ruled that Lincoln had violated the U.S. Constitution when he illegally suspended the writ of habeas corpus. After hearing this, Lincoln signed an arrest warrant to have the Chief Justice of the U.S. arrested. Republicans are into this stuff. Even though Lincoln was, relatively speaking, one of the better Republicans in hindsight. I'm sure a lot of Democrats objected at the time. Lincoln ordered the arrest of thousands in Maryland for the crime of suspected Southern sympathies, which they did have, including ordering the arrest of U.S. Congressman Henry May from Maryland. These people were arrested and held in military prisons without trial, and some of them for years. So, of course, these guys say, awesome, let's do that. But who? Who is it that needs to be arrested in all of this? And ultimately, I mean, the too long didn't read is they think Black Lives Matter protesters and the dreaded Antifa. That's who. How do we get to that? I don't know. They got a lot of words here. Let's see if it works. While some debate these measures still today, no one disagrees that Lincoln and his use of presidential power were responsible for saving the republic, while history and even former President Obama has judged Lincoln as perhaps our greatest president. Even the liberal Barack Obama agrees that he's our greatest president. Few would have agreed at the time he took those actions. Then, as now, a president with courage and determination was needed to preserve the Union. Today, the current threat to our United States by the international and domestic socialist/communist left is much more serious than anything Lincoln or our nation has faced in its history, including the Civil War. Ah, well, gee whiz, that's it. I mean, it's right there. What can I tell you? It's written, so must be true. Let's just move on because the guy wrote it. So, I mean, I don't know. How many people have been killed? How many forts attacked? How many, right. Doesn't matter. The point is, I, as a white person, am very, very scared that somebody else might ask for rights or something like that, and they might even, I don't know what, get in my face when I pepper spray them. And that's the same thing as the Civil War. All right. It goes on from there. And like I said, it's very long and we can't read the whole thing. We got to take our break anyway. But this is literally where they're going. We have well-funded, armed, and trained Marxists in Antifa and BLM strategically positioned in our major cities, acting openly with violence to silence opposition to their anti-American agenda. There's a very large leap of logic in this. Attacking federal buildings and police. I believe one of them had some fire damage and had to be cleaned up. Cowardly punching innocent people in the back of the head, which is a little bit like Fort Sumter. Assaulting people just eating in restaurants, which again is like, I don't know what, invading Pennsylvania, blah, 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 blah. It's not a good piece. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And a big thumbs up. Thanks very much to Justice Putnam in the background helping me out here. I understand that live listeners have been treated to a couple of missing breaks at the top of the hour, and I don't know. It was probably from one of our, monkeying around with things while we did a couple of pre-recorded shows. That sometimes requires a change, or just sometimes you hit the wrong button. Things happen. Luckily, nothing major, but I guess some of our live listeners, all of the live listeners, were treated to, my break music as opposed to the better choices that Justice typically makes for using for music during the breaks. And so maybe you, I don't know whether this was one of the breaks where you get French pop music and you've been missing it. It's back now. Thanks very much. And thanks to Scott for pointing that out. I don't think nobody else pointed it out. They weren't complaining. Nothing was happening. And that's because I had typically had the microphone either muted when I was screaming things like, to hell with everybody, I hate you all. That never came across. That was luckily nice. And occasionally you just have chatter between me and whoever might be on that day, me and Greg, talking about how well the segment went or how poorly the segment went or what else did we want to talk about some other time. And thanks for calling, all the exciting stuff that, it's fun to get a peek behind the curtain, I guess. I just wish we said things that were more fun during the breaks. But now you'll get nothing and like it and enjoy your French pop just as it should be. All right. I don't know. Do I continue with this thing? I mean, there's very little point in doing it, and I guess some people, eventually somebody will complain, what are you doing their propaganda work for them for? By reading this thing, you're just disseminating their message, as you should be, ignoring it or something maybe is possible that they might be asking me to do. None of the people to whom this ad is really targeted are listening to the show. And I guess we get to read it because we interrupt it and make ironical comments. And I know that ironical isn't really, the correct application of the word, but it's homage to Robin Williams, right? Doesn't he use it that way in Good Will Hunting? Anyway, this is obviously a very stupid thing, and I guess I was interested in giving people a flavor for how stupid the people who would take out this ad and then read this ad earnestly really are. But those of us who are reading it ironically are very, very smart. I am very intelligent, as the cartoon the Matt Boers cartoon goes. Anyway, let's see. They claim, of course, a well-funded, armed, and trained Marxist force in the form of Antifa and BLM. I like the way they put it. I mean, if you squint at things just right, you can kind of see what they're talking about, and you can shape it into. They're strategically positioned in our major cities, like they've been planted there by the attackers from Mars and War of the Worlds or something. We left off saying basically that they were saying Fort Sumter, Gettysburg, yada yada, all pretty much the same as a guy who punched somebody once and other people who were harassed while they were eating in restaurants. What else? Burning minority-owned businesses to the ground. I doubt it. I mean, probably it's not the aim of these things, but okay, whatever. All with elected officials in Democrat/socialist controlled cities openly encouraging this planned violence against civilians and businesses, which they're not. Then, to advance their cause, these socialists are acting to, quote, defund the police. Oh my God, I've said it, and you can't. That's that. Joe Biden's not the president now, because I said those three words. Creating chaos and suspending the rule of law that protects millions of average, particularly minority Americans. That's what the police are doing. The results being massive increases in violent crime and deaths in our cities and the destruction of small businesses orchestrated by these politicians and leftist groups, many funded by domestic and international communists, George Soros and the like, I'm sure. We are literally, not actually, under attack from within. Yikes. There's more. I mean, it's split up into 3 parts. That was just part 1. Then there are admitted Democrat, socialist, federal officials plotting to finish gutting the United States Constitution after 100 years of trying. They promise to take away critical individual rights like free speech, religious freedom, and the Second Amendment. Destroys that. Those would be the First Amendment, and the Second Amendment would be an easier way of stating that. Destroys states' rights by eliminating the Electoral College and more. Look out for those states' rights, please. Pack the Supreme Court. Give the right to vote to tens of millions of non-Americans. No. Open our borders. Blah, blah, blah. Which will reduce wages. That's an interesting tack to take on things. No one voted for these things that were hidden from the majority of Americans by the corrupt media, which we found out about them through osmosis, but not you. You didn't find out about them because they were hidden from you by the corrupt media. Something. Socialist left, what else are they doing? Openly working to destroy the United States since Obama promised to try to transform America. So that's the real thing. They're mad about that. This here comes in red ink. How do you like this? Culminating in this corrupt and provably fraudulent current election plan to illegally and unconstitutionally deny the American people their most sacred honor, right, and privilege. Honor comes first in that one. Which is their right to elect their representatives! Exclamation point. How can we have representative republic, capital R on both of those, if we cannot hold fair elections to elect our representatives? Question mark. There is no doubt that this attempted stealing of these elections again is, quote, is a case of rebellion, in fact, a clear, flagrant, and gigantic case of rebellion that requires exercising extraordinary authority to preserve our union. So yes, the last free, fair election, which they say wasn't free and wasn't fair, is in fact a rebellion. Has to be put down. So, kind of that's where they are. The rest of it, I guess we can dispense with. There's a little bit of extra all caps down here. A little bit of more. There's more red. Should we read just what's in red? I don't know. Blah, blah, blah. More invocations of the phrase, we the people. So, therefore, they're right. And et cetera, et cetera. And I guess the conclusion, which is even mostly red, I think. Let's see. Oh, I see. They want to, when the legislators, courts, and or our Congress fail to do their duty under the 12th Amendment, you must be ready, Mr. President, I'm missing a comma here, to immediately declare a limited form of capital M, Marshall, capital L law, and temporarily suspend the Constitution because we love it so much. Oh, and also suspend civilian control of these federal elections, because we should have military elections, I guess, for the sole purpose of having the military oversee, yes, a national revote. So the soldiers will come to your house and take you out and take you to an official ballot box and shoot you if you write a Democrat's name on the ballot, and everything will be fair after that. A vote that assures a fair election in every jurisdiction and reflects the true will of the people. Federal candidates only. So all the state elections were fine and dandy. Paper ballots, no computers. Okay. Hand counted with both parties watching every vote, except one of those parties is completely under arrest, just to make sure that they watch it correctly. Only registered voters. That's the way we did it. Photo ID to prove residence. Also done. Conducted safely with everyone wearing masks and 6 feet apart. How do you like that? Wow. Just like we did in Ohio, where they are working on impeaching the governor because he did it that way. Very interesting. Only then can the winning candidate be accepted as legitimate by a true majority of we the people, who must give our consent to be justly governed. And if we aren't, we'll take over your airports. Yes. Unfortunately, we're at a point where we can only trust our military to do this because our corrupt political class and courts have proven their inability to act fairly and within the law. And, most of the military voted for Biden, but whatever. I mean, it's a very confusing document, and I'm sure that there are plenty of people right there in Ohio who would say, no, we can't do things like we did in Ohio. Ohio was the most corrupt of all. So what can I say? Anyway, who paid for it? Paid for by the We the People Convention. Thomas R. Zawitowski, president. That very American name, they would say about other people. Except for them, it's super patriotic. And you can read more of their crap at We the People Convention. WeThePeopleConvention.org. There's more, at some point it becomes useless to read the rest of this. And this is that point. Let's see what JJ adds to this by way of commentary. The WTPC leader has an interesting background. Ohio Tea Party leader, who's behind this, I guess that's Zapatowski. Here's the headline. Ohio Tea Party leader says he did not try to, quote, extort $1 million from Mary Taylor's campaign for governor. Well, okay, that settles that. That is an interesting background. I'm kind of hoping, JJ concludes here, that everyone actually reads the full text of the ad. Damn. Not because I think any of this will happen, but because when it doesn't happen, it could stir up a number of violent acts from the true believers. I don't know. I think we got a good flavor for what's in there. Not everybody that JJ is talking to has to fit everything within a 2-hour format. And so I think we can be forgiven. That gives you a flavor of what's going on. And who knows? I don't know. Like I said, this probably doesn't even get unanimous backing among Tea Party-oriented, militia-oriented, Trump-oriented wackos in Ohio. I'm sure there are plenty of people in Ohio who feel that their elections were badly handled, and they were badly handled because of the masks and the distancing, and they hate DeWine and they want to impeach him. I mean, that's actually going on right now in Ohio, and I guess do I need to find some of the articles about that just to prove my point? Well, fine. Here they are. Washington Post, not the Washington Examiner or Washington Times, has this report from just one day ago. Ohio GOP lawmakers are trying to impeach Governor Mike DeWine over his COVID-19 rules. He says they're ignoring reality. So what can I tell you? While trying to contain the spread of the coronavirus, DeWine has faced throngs of armed protesters at the State House and crowds outside his home. Now he's facing efforts from within his own party to push him out of office entirely. A group of 4 Republican state lawmakers filed a dozen articles of impeachment against DeWine on Monday, saying the governor violated state and federal laws by requiring masks in public and ordering some businesses to close. But something, and that was a great way of doing things in the election, and so there's going to be a big fight among these losers in Ohio as well, and I don't know. I mean, any of this stuff could spark violence. Anyway, I think we've kind of, we've certainly given more time to the spirit of J.J. McNabb's request than anything else, and I guess now you can consider yourself informed and follow the rest of her reporting on the subject with clear eyes about what's going on. Let's see. Other things to catch up on. Talking Points memo, just switching gears once again, gives us this one here. Is it their own reporting? Yes, it is. Zeke Miller, CDC, to shorten recommended quarantine for COVID-19 exposure. That's interesting, as Republican politicians have been reducing it on their own volition for some time to the length of time for which it was convenient for me. And, of course, we watched Don Trump Jr. do the same just the other day. So what do they have to say about it? CDC is set to shorten the recommended length of quarantine after exposure to someone who's positive for COVID-19 as the virus rages across the nation. Why? I don't know. According to a senior administration official, and this administration sucks, I remind you, the new guidelines, which are set to be released as soon as Tuesday evening, that's last night, will allow people who have come in contact to someone, or with someone, I would say, infected with the virus to resume normal activities after 10 days or 7 days if they receive a negative test result. That's down from the 14-day period recommended since the onset of the pandemic. And oh my God, what are you doing changing the rules in the middle of things, and don't you know, blah, blah, blah. That was, of course, the logic that was being used by anti-maskers to resist mask mandates or even just polite mask requests. Don't you know that in the beginning, the CDC said don't wear the masks, and then they changed their mind, and so because there was a change, none of this can be valid. Well, don't you know that they used to say you had to quarantine for 14 days, and now they're saying 7 days is okay? That's a change of mind, and you can't. But I don't know. We're not like them, and so we're, I suppose, supposed to accept it. I don't know what the science on it is. My understanding all along was that they were, early on anyway, right? Weren't they sort of leaning towards maybe it needs to be longer than 14 days? Maybe 14 days isn't enough. But okay, 7 days if you receive a negative test result. But again, you know, when was the test taken? When was your exposure? Make sure there's enough days for there to be virus replicating that can be found by the test. The official who spoke on condition of anonymity to preview the announcement said the policy change had been discussed for some time as scientists have studied the incubation period for the virus. The policy would hasten the return to normal activities by those deemed to be close contacts of those infected with the virus, which has infected more than 13.5 million Americans. It's over 14 million on the world meters, and killed at least 270,000. And we should probably talk about those numbers too. Now, okay, I understand that. That's not convincing to me. Of course, the policy would hasten the return to normal activities, but would it be safe for them to return to normal activities? Oh, I don't know, but it will hasten that. Okay, but that's the wrong answer. While the CDC had said the incubation period for the virus was thought to extend to 14 days, this is the science we need, most individuals become infectious and develop symptoms between 4 and 5 days after exposure. Okay. It's not the first time that the CDC has adjusted its guidance for the novel coronavirus as it adjusted to new research. In July, the agency shortened from 14 days to 10 its advice on how long a person should stay in isolation after their first experience of COVID symptoms, provided they're no longer sick. The new guidance was presented Tuesday at a White House coronavirus task force meeting for final approval, and since the White House had a hand in it, you never know. Maybe it's just horrible, and you shouldn't be paying any attention to it. I don't know. We'll see. Let's see. Speaking of the coronavirus numbers, yeah, you know, they're bad. Like I said, Worldometers, though, has us over 14 million. I think it may be over 14.1 million already. We went over the top of 14 million yesterday, and then blew past 14.1 million along the way. Yes, and we are past 277 now, 277,000 total deaths in the United States, according again to the Worldometers, which runs about 3 days or more in front of Johns Hopkins. I'm not really sure why Hopkins is so cautious. A lot of people like to go with the more cautious numbers. But Worldometers is pretty good about linking to what their sources are, and they seem to get their data direct from municipal and localized health authorities. So there you have it, 277,000 deaths now. We got to get that announcement out via Twitter. I was curious about how these numbers compare, just in terms of where we stand in terms of other national emergencies and incidents of these sorts. What kind of thing can you compare it to? Well, unfortunately, the answer is that it could be compared at this point now to World War II. I just note for the record, having looked this stuff up in the last couple of days, I was curious about the number of combat losses in World War II versus losses to COVID-19 at this point. So we're talking about the total, the accepted numbers vary a little bit, but the latest scholarship puts military combat losses across all the branches in World War II at about 407,000 killed, 407,316 if you want to go with those kind of numbers. I've seen variations on it that put it at about 405,000, but still in the neighborhood of just over 400,000 killed in World War II. Now, mind you, that was for the United States from late 1941 through late 1945. It's 4 years to accumulate the 407,000 deaths. It wasn't necessarily evenly spread across those 4 years, but it did take 4 years to amass that. We are at 277,000, still considerably less than 400,000, but well past halfway. In fact, we're at 2/3. And mind you, also, we've done this in 9 months, right? From March, when people first started dying in the United States of the disease, through, we'll say through November. 270, if you peg it at about 275, if you don't want to include any of the December deaths. 276,000 people dying in 9 months is 2/3 of the losses of World War II packed into less than 1 year. The World War II losses, of course, like I said, taking 4 years to accumulate. This has been an epic disaster. And yes, it is absolutely Donald Trump's fault that it went this way. Were people going to die? Yes. Were lots of people going to die? Yes. Almost regardless of what you do in the face of this disease, but to have spent the initial months and still be out there insisting that masks are the wrong idea is just like, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it's developing the nuclear bomb to end World War II, but dropping it on our own troops. It will end World War II if you drop it on us, too. But I thought the idea was to eliminate the enemy as opposed to ourselves. And then, of course, well, we don't mean to get into a discussion of the morality of dropping atomic weapons on civilian targets for the enemy, but well, that will be another show. We'll deal with that another day. But I thought you might be interested in the fact that we are at 2/3 of the losses of World War II. And the way things are progressing, I mean, there's 2,000, almost 2,500 deaths reported yesterday. We're going to stay well over 2,000 for some time now, and the way the trends are going, you will see 300,000 dead easily before the end of this year. There should be no problem meeting that. We're America. We can do it. And 15 million cases now imminent. We're adding about 100,000 cases in a matter of hours during the daytime hours, and clicking past 100,000 new case increments in about 4 hours reporting time. We just don't have enough time usually to click over it twice during the same reporting day. So 200, or 150 to 200,000 new cases a day. I think the last two increments of a million, from 12 to 13 million and then from 13 to 14 million, have both happened in less than a week. 6 days, both of them, to add a million cases. So we went over the top of 14 million yesterday. 6 days from yesterday. Today's Wednesday. Yesterday was Tuesday. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Saturday and Sunday weekend reporting is sometimes a little bit slow, but expect then by Monday that we'll be announcing 15 million cases in the United States. To me, a significant number. I mean, a lot of people would consider that a significant number. To me, a significant number because I think back to Trump's initial reaction to the virus reaching our shores. Remember that he had told us, well, you're talking about 15 cases and sooner it'll be down to 0. And now we face not 0 and not 15, but 15 million. Good job on the virus, you idiot. I can't believe that there aren't people. Of course, I keep saying, history will demand to know why we didn't hang Trump, but I can't believe that there aren't people with those numbers. 2/3 of the losses of World War II's 4 years of World War II in just 9 months here, and not 15 going down to 0, but 15 increasing to 15 million cases, that there aren't more mobs out in the streets of the towns of America burning Trump in effigy is remarkable. It's unbelievable. And then today he'll be standing out there saying, I cured the virus. Just like he did on October 8th. I cured it. I had the miracle cure. You're all going to get it for free. Soon, 2 weeks. 8 weeks later, 50, 60,000 additional deaths. We are going to pass the point where it's 60,000 people will have died since he promised that he would be able to distribute for free the miracle drug that would ensure that nobody died. 60,000 more people. And remember, of course, 60,000 was the number at which Jared Kushner declared the response to the virus a great success story for America. And right about the time that we hit the 60,000 dead and the 15 million cases, will be creeping up on 300,000 killed, which is 5 times the number of the great success story. And the fact that nobody is calling for Trump's eyes to be gouged out of his head in front of large crowds all across America is, I don't know what to tell you. Okay, consent to the governed. What if we, the people, think that something else should happen? What about if the end of martial law is how it ended for Saddam Hussein, or how it ended for Nicolae Ceausescu? Any number of things can happen under martial law. Don't know if it's the can of worms you meant to open. Anyway, getting away from all of that, other coronavirus news out there. There was something along the way that I said, we should discuss this other issue of coronavirus, and now I can't recall what it is, but maybe we'll get to it just by combing through. Yes, right. I guess because I was pegging the 9 months that we've been in losing people dying here in the United States to coronavirus. The timeline is now questionable, and I suppose it's entirely possible that people have been dying for considerably longer than just 9 months. A lot of reporting over the weekend, summarized here in The Hill, which no one likes for me to rely on, but they use attractive pictures in their Twitter feed, and that's how this sort of thing happens. Coronavirus, once again, rumored to have been present in the U.S. earlier than initially thought, but this time, according to CDC scientists, Zach Burdick wrote this up for The Hill. The bottom line of it, coronavirus, they now say, present in the U.S. as early as mid-December 2019, a period earlier than officially identified in either China or the U.S., according to new research from CDC. Apparently, the study published on Monday found evidence of the virus in 106 of over 7,000 blood donations made to the Red Cross in 9 states. These donations collected between December 13th and January 17th of this year, the December of last year, January of this year, with the Red Cross later submitting them to the CDC to test for antibodies. Well, those antibodies were detected in 39 samples on the West Coast, in Washington, in Oregon, California, all of them collected between December 13th and 16th. Antibodies detected in another 67 samples in Connecticut, Iowa, Massachusetts, Michigan, Rhode Island, and Wisconsin. Those samples were collected between December 30th and January 17th. So yeah, a lot earlier. And reading through this, it's not entirely clear, but it seems like it was detected here before it was announced in China. But China will pay bigly and strongly for what they did to America. That was part of Trump's October 8th video too. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message too is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. How would you like a complete shift in our topic? How about that? That would be fun, right? Anyway, I just thought that was important to bring to your attention. I don't know what's going to come of it. We've always had suspicions that the virus was present in the United States before the official announcement, but that does tend to, and there's not much discussion in the roll call, or rather the Hill article, about the timeline versus when it arrived here versus when it was identified in China, and I suppose it could still be the case because I think they identified it in China in November of 2019. And could still, of course, have made it to the United States by December 13th, but originated in China. That doesn't necessarily blow up that story, but it does put kind of a dent in it. Anyway, not going to settle that here and now, but we can move to something else, something we've paid particular attention to here on the show with some new developments. I mentioned to you the other day that the leadership contests that are going on inside the Democratic caucus, and that there were more contests to be settled, and that meant more opportunities for us to test the Moneyball hypothesis. The I don't know what we'll call it on Twitter. We'll come up with something else. The KagroX test for who should win these contests, or predicting who will win these contests. But there is a wrinkle in all of this that we should introduce into our collective mental database here. The contests going on right now, I think they may have settled all the leadership races, although I don't know if I got all the results reported or not, but they all went pretty much according to the prediction methodology, which is, of course, to take a quick look at how much money has been raised and distributed by the leadership PACs of the contestants in the race, and that generally speaking, the person who had given out the most money to the most colleagues, who were then, of course, had won their elections and were present to vote in the caucus-wide elections for these races, would likely be the winner. And it's not, we've explained before, it's not strictly done that way. It's certainly not. I don't even know whether other members look at this at all or whether anyone pays any attention to it. It's just that it's a very good proxy for how many relationships have these two contestants built with the voting constituency in the Democratic caucus, and how strong are the ties, and then when it comes time to ask for people's support, are they favorably inclined to giving it or not? Anyway, the next set of races are for committee chairmanships, and there's a slightly different approach to the way this is done. It still requires the vote of the full caucus. I don't know whether it's for every committee, but it's certainly for some of the plum committees, the more powerful committees, like the Appropriations Committee. And that's the first contest that comes up. And I mentioned to you, well, actually, I think I snuck in at the end of the show yesterday saying, you won't like the way the Moneyball prediction goes for the Appropriations Committee chairmanship. But there's another one out there, another contest out there. Which one was it? Was it for a committee chairmanship? Yeah, I think so. Yes, the Foreign Affairs, or what do they call it in the House? Well, they used to then call it the International Affairs, but I think they've gone back to the Foreign Affairs or Foreign Relations Committee. Anyway, the name doesn't matter as much, but there's a contest there too. First, though, was the Appropriations Committee. Very powerful, obviously. You know about the appropriations process. And it was, there's a couple of wrinkles. One, in appropriations and in foreign affairs, there were three-way races going on. So that adds a complicating factor. I mean, you can just do the same thing and check on all of their PACs. And so far, it's held pretty much steady in terms of validating the theory. At the very least, I mean, we haven't had these contests come to a conclusion yet, so we can't tell. But at the very least, there have been results enough to know that the person who trails, especially when they trail badly in a three-way race, gets eliminated earliest in all this. The other wrinkle is that because these are committee positions, the process begins in the Steering and Policy Committee. We've mentioned the Steering and Policy Committees here in the House and in the Senate, in the Democratic caucuses in the House and Senate in the past, going way, way back to, when was it? I don't even remember, like 2000, early 2000s, when Joe Lieberman was defecting essentially from the Democratic Party and endorsing the George W. Bush reelection, et cetera, and people said, we're mad about this. We should prevent Joe Lieberman from taking the gavel of the Homeland Security Committee in the Senate. I mean, this is a plum position that's handed out, essentially along lines of party loyalty, generally speaking. And so why should someone who's been less than loyal to the party and the party's nominee get the gavel in something like this? And then the question arose, well, who do we speak to make sure that this happens? Do we just yell at Harry Reid or what? What's the story here? And the answer is you got to go to the Steering and Policy Committee, which is an internal organization of the Democratic caucus both in the House and the Senate. And the constituency of the Steering and Policy Committee is the membership of the caucus, and it's not that easy to influence it from the outside. Non-members don't have a great deal of influence in this, but they can speak up and make a public stink about it. But to do so means identifying the process, learning about it, and figuring out where are the pressure points and who are the members of the Steering and Policy Committee, and to what pressures might they be susceptible. And even in the first instance, we find that because they're private sort of organizations, they're not public-facing organizations, the members know who's on the Steering and Policy Committee, but there's no requirement, like it would be for standing committees of either the House or the Senate, to tell the public who's on these committees, because they're not public organizations. They're private party organizations, and so they don't actually always announce who's on these things, maybe for that reason, so that you can't get to them and pressure them about everything. The people who need to know, and the rest of you are kept in the dark. But Democrats don't like things that way, so the names tend to come out. But actually, as it turns out, the Republicans are actually usually much more forthcoming about who's on those committees than Democrats are. I don't know how much credit you want to give them for that, but it's there. All right. So in the appropriations contest, it was a three-way contest. Let me start with this. The roll call article from last week describing what's going on here, and I'll tell you who the players are. House Democrats set to pick new appropriations chairwoman. A three-way race, all women as candidates for the chair. The next panel leader will be at the forefront of efforts to enact the Biden administration's agenda. Who's up? Jennifer Schutt reporting this on November 30th. And a correction added on December 1st. Beneficiaries of more than $1.4 trillion in annual federal spending. We'll find out this week, who will be steering the ship at Appropriations Committee Chairwoman for the 117th Congress. Your contestants. Marcy Kaptur of Ohio, the most senior panel member in line for the job. So if it's just straight seniority, the answer would be Marcy Kaptur. But challenging her for the job, Connecticut's Rosa DeLauro, second in seniority, but who has the most impressive list of endorsements for the job, and an important one comes through later on in the story. And then Debbie Wasserman Schultz, further down the seniority list, but she's the most prolific party fundraiser. Ooh, well, that does create an issue, doesn't it? And I know, like I said, if you just go by the money, my guess is that a lot of you would say, geez, Debbie Wasserman Schultz back again. A lot of people can't stand her for various reasons. And I mean, the Bernie Sanders faction, of course, points to her tenure at the Democratic National Committee, which was widely viewed, certainly among Sanders supporters, as disastrous. And gosh, it wasn't pretty, that's for sure. What should we say, reign over the Democratic National Committee. Things went kind of haywire at a rather sensitive point. But, of course, a lot of others would say a lot of that was driven by the Sanders supporters' need to create conflict among the DNC members in order to save the Sanders candidacy. But yeah, without getting too much into that, I will simply say I know that the name Debbie Wasserman Schultz will elicit some groans, and not just from Sanders supporters, right? So, what happens? Well, like I said, if you just look at the money, think on this for a second. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, let's see, before she was DNC, I think she headed the DCCC at some point, and then went on from there to the DNC. So, I mean, you can't be more attuned to the fundraising mechanism than that. And she'll have all the connections and will have exploited them along the way to fill up her leadership pack. Not to mention the number of members who will have gotten support from the DCCC along the way when she was head of that. But we won't count those because that's not, quote unquote, her money to give out, even though it's very often played with that way. We'll focus just on the leadership packs. And the issue is that because she was such a prolific fundraiser, she kills it in the fundraising in the leadership pack. Rosa DeLauro, I didn't total all of it up, but okay, we'll start with 2020 fundraising. And here's your basic answer, right? Rosa DeLauro in 2020 raised and distributed $300,000 from her leadership pack to about 98 or so members of the House. With her PAC, by the way, if you're ever interested in knowing the names, are the Committee for a Democratic Future PAC. Debbie Wasserman Schultz heads the Democrats Win Seats PAC. Get it? There's one of the cute names, right? Debbie Wasserman Schultz, DWS. Democrats Win Seats, DWS. Anyway, what did she do? Well, if you're just looking at the top line numbers, 315,000 of which went to House candidates, 99 of them in the 2020 cycle. The real difference comes in earlier cycles, too. But Marcy Kaptur in 2020, to tell you, all right, what happens to Marcy Kaptur? Most senior Democrat. Does seniority control? $21,000 distributed among 12 House candidates in 2020. She was obviously relying on her seniority in this race and just hasn't done the level of work that the others have done. Rosa DeLauro, her leadership PAC record goes back to 2002. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, hers goes back to 2006. as does Marcy Kaptur's. But Marcy Kaptur really just, like I said, it's been anemic. 21,000 in this cycle, 10,000, 3,000, 5,000, 39,500 in 2012, maybe when she was vying for the second spot there, or perhaps looking at another committee, I don't know. 2,000, 5,000, 10,000. Just not the kind of numbers you need to compete. Rosa DeLauro blows her out of the water. 300K this time around. Just 56, though, in 2018. 12,000 in 2016. 11,000. So he was sort of neglecting the job here, right? 12,000, 11,000, 11,000. Back in 2010, 49,000. 17,000. 4,000. 31,000. But a big score in 2002, positioning herself for, I think she was in the actual leadership ladder at that point. $221,000 way back when. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, stronger in more recent years, 317,000 in 2020, 100,000, 106,000 in 2018, 260,000 in 2016, 600,000 or more in 2014, 400,000 in 2012, another 600,000 in 2010, 476,000 in 2008. And in the first year in operation, 85,000 in 2006. So really killing it in the later years. Strictly by the numbers, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the model would predict, takes that race. The race isn't over. She hasn't done it. They're still getting ready to vote. And also, I guess if you look down, if you really drill down and see, well, how many of those people won their races? How many people are around to vote for Debbie Wasserman Schultz versus Rosa DeLauro in the caucus? Because the caucus still has to vote. But there's an intermediate step, and this is what's going on here, the other wrinkle. The Steering and Policy Committee. There's about 50 or so members of the Steering and Policy Committee, apportioned throughout the Democratic caucus with, crazy formulas. The members of the leadership are on it. Other top advisors to the speaker are on it, but there are slots set aside for a representative of the incoming first term members. The chief deputy whips have representation there. Also, there's all kinds of ways of apportioning to make sure that it's fairly representative. And you'll recall, did we make mention of this the other day? That it's almost so exaggerated to try and to represent all factions of the caucus that the Steering and Policy Committee apparently has 3 co-chairs out there, and that they come from different factions very purposely of the caucus. I think people were raising a stink the other day on Twitter that Nancy Pelosi had, who did she put on the, I'll have to go around and take a look, but she put one of her allies in the job of one of the 3 co-chairs. And people were saying, oh, look, she's, rigging things and putting her cronies in these positions. And in fact, what was going on was Pelosi was responding to the various constituencies in the caucus and making sure that they were all represented in the leadership of the Steering and Policy Committee, which makes these decisions. Let's see. I forget how we put this, but I might not be able to immediately find the tweet that will remind me. Oh, yeah, here it is. But the complaint was, oh, yes, right, Sherry Bustos, the DCCC chair that people are angry with for justifiable reasons. In particular, they hate the vendor blacklist. Remember that whole thing that if you worked with Democrats who were challenging incumbent Democrats in primaries as a consultant, you would be blacklisted by the DCCC, and anybody who hired you would lose DCCC support. I mean, it was way out there in terms of what really, could or should have been done about challenges to incumbents. Is unfair, an unfortunate development, to be sure. And everybody hated Sherry Bustos for, not everybody, she had her supporters. and they're in the caucus, and they need to be represented too. So putting Sherry Bustos in as one of the co-chairs of the Steering and Policy Committee is a sop to the people who said, yeah, we ought to be cracking down on people who are looking to unseat incumbents. That's not us, but they are out there. And also you should note, well, like I said, one of 3 co-chairs, the others being Eric Swalwell, who comes from a very different faction, and Barbara Lee, who comes from a very, very different faction. And this is, like I said, Pelosi exercising her superpower here, making sure that there are opportunities set aside for all factions of the caucus to participate in caucus leadership. So, the Steering and Policy Committee, what's it all about? What's it do? And why is it important? I grabbed this piece from Twitter friend of many of you, Daniel Schumann, who had put this piece out under the URL of our blog here, First Branch Forecast, where Congress learns about Congress, because that's the kind of thing he's into, just like me. So Daniel Schumann put this thing out talking about the Steering and Policy Committee. Who steers the ship? An examination of House Steering and Policy Committee membership. And we'll run through this, and then we'll tell you what we found out about the Moneyball aspect of the race and what the Policy Committee did in this race so far. House Democrats and Republicans use internal party committees to control major aspects of the legislative process, including choosing who gets to serve on legislative committees. As we all know, personnel is policy. Under the House rules, each party decides committee assignments for its members. As a result, the Steering and Policy Committee are the scenes, I guess we would say, of intra-party jockeying for power. With a large number of members competing for a relatively small number of key committee assignments and leadership roles, the parties' respective steering committees act as a filter mechanism by which leadership taxes members to provide financial contributions in support of the party. Isn't that interesting? Now, first, House Democrats are up first. House Dems have a combined Steering and Policy Committee. Not always the case. It has 6 classes of members. Last week, House Democrats published the rules for the Steering and Policy Committee, which they don't always do, helping to provide a much clearer picture of how members are elected to internal positions. And it's linked here in case you want to take a look. Not too much changed, other than the addition of Rule number 42, which supports greater diversity hiring in Democratic congressional offices. How do you like that? It's good, right? You can compare the differences between the 115th, 116th caucus rules and now the new 117th rules at a link provided in the article. The first class of members of the steering committee are the steering committee chairs, co-chairs, and vice chairs. Co-chairs, there are 3 of them, are elected by the members. Not always the case. Sometimes they're kind of appointed by the speaker. And with the assent of the members added, vice chairs are appointed by the chair. Okay, the second class, this doesn't clear things up all that well, but it's a confusing thing. But let me get past this because this is the important stuff. The second class are the caucus political apparatus. This includes the policy chair, the co-chair and vice chairs, the caucus co-chairs, the Democratic whip and assistant to the Democratic leader, the caucus chair, the vice chair, the DCCC chair, caucus leadership representatives, and a freshman representative. Some of these positions are chosen by the members, others by the steering committee chair, i.e., the speaker. That's who chairs the steering and policy committee. And so that clears that piece up, right? Some of the co-chairs, as we said, elected by members, vice chairs appointed by the chair is the speaker, and there you have it. Maybe we've been imprecise in the correct title for the people who have been recently placed by the speaker. The third class of members here are the whips, led by the senior deputy whip with 8 chief deputy whips. The people serving in these positions almost never change, despite Rule number 10, which states that no member shall be appointed or elected to more than 2 consecutive terms in those jobs. But hey, to hell with that. The fourth class are regional representatives, and there are 12 of them. They are elected by region. Fifth class are a handful of committee chairs, the big plum assignments: appropriations, budget, energy and commerce, financial services, rules, and ways and means. Plus the organizational study and review chair and another freshman rep. These positions are composed largely of people nominated by the steering committee itself. The sixth class are members appointed by the Democratic leader, i.e., in this case now, the Speaker, and there are a lot of them, 15 in this Congress. What's notable about these 50-something members is how many of them are chosen directly or indirectly by the Democratic leader. There is no question Speaker Pelosi dominates the Steering and Policy Committee. Per the rules, the committee has its own secret rules, separate from the caucus rules, but we have never seen them. In addition, a handful of members in the caucus routinely hold key positions inside the steering committee. You can literally watch them as they move up the ladder over multiple Congresses. You can watch as they are groomed as freshmen, move up, get booted if they don't toe the line, and eventually rotate among the different leadership positions. The membership is relatively static. Key current Democratic members include Representatives Pelosi, DeLauro, Hoyer, Waters, Lewis, DeJet. Do we have that name pronounced correctly finally? Wasserman Schultz, Schakowsky, and Welch. And what's the date on this piece, too? We got to go back and take a look. We have looked for a list of all the steering committee members, but there's no public list for the 116th Congress, and we have not yet had our request for the list fulfilled by its leadership. So obviously we're talking about an article that goes back to July of 2020 is the date on this thing. And so Lewis, obviously, no longer there. But he has embedded in this piece here the completed list here that they were able to put together and embedded below. This is like a screen grab from, well, not a screen grab, but a dynamic sortable, I think, database. But when you were saying you can see people literally moving up the ladder, here's what you see is people moving up in these various leadership positions. Now, House Republicans do things differently, and I don't have time to go through House Republicans and how they do it and what the differences are in this. Oh, look at this. I guess I got this from Schumann on Twitter, but it says here at the bottom, written by Taylor Swift. It's Taylor J. Swift, so I'm sure probably a different one. But anyway, a pretty good glance at how the committee is made up and what it is that they do and who's moving in what directions here. And this gives you an idea of what the contest is going to be like. Now, the other part that I want to add here is that for these committee chairmanships, the other wrinkle for how it's selected is that although it is a vote taken ultimately in the full caucus, the House Democrats Steering and Policy Committee makes an endorsement, a recommendation, voting among the 50 or so members that are there for who they recommend be given the chairmanship for these committees. And they might not necessarily be playing the same game. Reminder that these people are all in leadership and for the most part have been in the business of giving out the money from their leadership PACs to rise in the leadership as opposed to accepting the help of other leadership PAC laden folks who are trying to work their way up the ladders. They might not be subject to the same influences, although very often you do find that, in fact, people who have leadership PACs and are in leadership do occasionally have tough races and require help or require a tax of sorts, of a donation to their leadership PAC so that they can stay on top of you. It happens out there. Anyway, as it happens, like I said, the Moneyball game, if it was just straight vote of the caucus, we know that that works pretty well in determining caucus voting outcome. But we don't know how it works on the steering committee members. And as a matter of fact, although Debbie Wasserman Schultz has raised much more and distributed much more money than either Marcy Kaptur or Rosa DeLauro, it turns out the committee's recommendation to the full caucus is that DeLauro take the chair. Another contest now in the Foreign Affairs Committee looms between Gregory Meeks, Joaquin Castro, and Brad Sherman. And here, it looks like, I think, if I saw the reports correctly, that it looks like things will be leaning towards Gregory Meeks, who has gotten the endorsement of the Steering and Policy Committee, despite the fact that he lags in fundraising behind Brad Sherman. Sherman having done about a total of about $143,000 to 54 or so members. Meeks not far behind, $94,198 to 48 donors. A close call there, but for whatever reason, the committee goes with the second place finisher in this. Will the conference, or rather will the full caucus, agree with them? They usually do agree with the recommendation of the Steering and Policy Committee and ignore the money.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
So I'll leave you with that, and we'll find out what the results are of the full caucus voting probably by the end of the week and see how it goes. Of course, now, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam will take you away like Calgon used to in the old days and take you on a tour around the country and around the world with the top headlines that we, for one reason or another, ignored here today.